Welcome, everyone, to Hot Takes. I'm your host, Tara McEwen, and founder of McEwen Media. I started my business almost 4 years ago now. And the first three books that I read were Simon Sinek's Start With Why, because it's in the title, you start here. And then two books on selling, because I knew that if I was going to make this business a thing, I needed to figure out how to sell it. And in 4 years, that has been kind of the steepest learning curve. If you've ever started a business or tried to be an entrepreneur, you know that there are many tasks that you need to learn in order to create a business. Sales is the most important thing. And as I always say with media strategies, marketing strategies, if you don't know how to sell, and if you don't know how to sell in a way that feels right to you, none of that is going to make any sense. So that's why I'm so glad to share the journey that I've been on. I follow my own advice, right? I've gone through the mud, I've gone through the murk, and now I'm going to share the learnings with you. So in this conversation, I'm going to share there were three key phases that I went through in order to be comfortable with sales and in order to find the sales style that works for me. And really that is the key, is finding the style that works for you. Because if it doesn't feel right, you're not going to do it. And you're not just going to hear me talk about this. I actually want to dig deeper into what was happening and how others can move through that exact same situation, and also how I can be a little bit better going forward. So my guest today is Talica Davies. She's a sales consultant who helps founder-led businesses streamline their sales with simple, repeatable processes that drive revenue without sleaze or burnout. Can you hear me in the back? Without the sleaze and burnout. With 20 years of experience and more than $750 million in closed sales, she specializes in creating sales strategies that feel natural, effective, and scalable. So let's get to it. Talitha, welcome to the stage.
Hi, Tara. Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Oh, me too. I mean, we connected. We were both co-presenters for a workshop with a mutual friend of ours, Annabelle King, and I connected with you right away. I've been following you on LinkedIn, and I love your approach to sales, because there are so many sales experts out there who are like, oh yeah, just build the sales funnel and manipulate them and lead into fear and hold them to the pressure. Your approach about having it be natural and effective and without the sleaze, I thought, if I knew you 4 years ago, my journey would have been a lot easier. So tell me a little bit, how did you get into sales?
I didn't find sales. Sales found me. I think that's the way. I mean, what child, says to themselves, I want to be a salesperson when I grow up.
Right.
It was more that I needed a job when I was in high school. And so I started selling jeans to teenagers. And I was like, wow, when I got my first commission check on top of my hourly rate, I'm like, there's something here. Like, this feels good. I think I can do this. And then I carried on in university. I sold suits. And that was kind of fun and also addicting. And then I just have always had a sales job from that, because I found that I really liked the upside and I liked having the control over my own revenue and earning power in a way that I wasn't getting in other roles.
Yeah, what a fantastic early lesson for you to have. I was thinking about my first job in high school and university. Similar kind of like first introduction of, well, this is how you can make a lot of money. But my experience was working in restaurants. So
Right.
for me, making a lot of money was delivering quality product in large volumes. But I still, when you work in food service, people know what they're going to order when they walk in the door. I didn't have to do
Right.
any selling. So I think that, those early jobs, those early exposures to how to make money really plant the seeds for how we make money as adults. And I say this now looking in the rearview mirror. But honestly, like when I first started and decided to go into business for myself, like it was just I didn't even know where to begin with selling and marketing this product. And actually, the first couple of clients that I had, I would say for the first year of McEwen Media, I didn't actually sell anything. I received business. The first client I ever had, we had three separate calls where at the time I was thinking that I wanted to be a writer. Like when I was a child, I just knew I wanted to write for a living. So I was getting her advice on like, what's the freelance scene like? Like, how do I get this business off the ground? And she kept saying, she was also, she was one of my experts on the Marilyn Dennis show. And she kept saying, well, I'm actually having a hard time getting booked on TV. I would hire someone like you to do this for me. We had that conversation 3 times. And every time I was like, oh, what a nice thing for her to say. The third conversation, she said, Tara, I'm hiring you for this. What can I pay you to do this? Honestly, that is how McEwen Media was born.
I
And
love that.
from there, it was just referrals from her. So I did a solid year of business where money just came to me. So like, when you hear that, like, is that the dream, or is that,
Yeah, well, I actually think that's more common than we think. And I would say that a lot of the founders that I work with, their first few years in business, oftentimes they have come from a corporate job, they have networks, and so they're filling their pipelines, they're filling their business with warm referrals, people they know. But there comes a point in time when you kind of exhaust your warm network. And I find that that happens for a lot of people around the 4 or 5 year mark, sometimes earlier, it depends. And that is where you have to be a little more proactive about and intentional about what it actually means to sell. And I think it's really interesting, like when you shared your story about your, your early career in food service, I actually think everyone is always selling something. And it is, like we sell the experience. As a server, we're selling the experience. People want to, like, they might come into the restaurant knowing what they want to order, but maybe you're helping them, pair it with some wine, or selling the experience of the evening so you get a better tip. And you want them to enjoy themselves.
Yeah.
But even when we are in delivery, right? Like when we're delivering for our clients, we're still selling. Like we are providing a really good service, or we are advocating on behalf of our clients, or we are problem solving for them. And to me, that is actually what we're doing when we sell. The transaction piece is that, like, that's the part that everyone seems to focus on.
Yes.
And that's the tip of the iceberg. There's all this stuff underneath the surface, which can be encompassed in sales, which we don't really talk about, which is the service, the problem solving, the experience, all the rest of it.
Yeah. I love that observation too, that it's about the awareness. And even when I look back, I'm like, I had zero awareness. And I am actually quite proud of myself that I moved into awareness within that first year, because even though clients were coming to me, I didn't have a clearly defined offer. I used that year to kind of say yes to everything and just pick and choose what felt right. But I was on the brink of burnout with like 10 clients because everyone was being served differently.
Yeah.
I didn't say no to anyone. I didn't have consistent pricing. So for me, on a mental level, sure, money was just appearing to me, but I wasn't taking active steps to make it happen. And because of that, I didn't have control over my business. So, when summer hit and my entire client base was like, oh, well, we don't want to be on TV in the summertime. See ya. I'm like, oh crap, how do I make money in this way? I didn't think through that kind of thing. So, it feels nice. Like I didn't have to deal with the ick. I didn't have to ask for the sale. But asking for the sale is when you actually build a business. That's actually where you take control of where the money's coming from.
Yeah, I love that observation of a lack of awareness, because it's true. And I see that. I think about our journey as salespeople. And in the beginning, I see this all the time where there's a lack of awareness of what we're doing, but there's also a misfocus. And so we tend to focus on tools. And I see this especially in like sales training programs. They're like, here's the CRM. This is how. That's the extent of the sales training. Like these are all the pieces of sales tech we use. And my approach is always way more foundational than that. It's a back to basics. And I think the biggest gift we can give ourselves in this early stage of selling is to define what we're doing when we sell. There's the transactional piece, but there's also what are we actually doing? Because I firmly believe that you cannot outperform or outsell a poor definition. And so if the definition is, okay, this is a transaction, that's always going to feel ick. How could it never, right? Like, how could that never feel gross? But if you define it as advocacy or service or problem solving, then you can feel really rooted in the value that you're providing. And it becomes a lot easier to kind of push through the discomfort that is associated with sales. And that never stops, right? Like no matter how long we've been doing it, we will always encounter people who, aren't always that polite or ghost us or, whatever. So I think that awareness and really defining what does it mean? What am I actually doing when I'm selling is so critical.
Yeah. Yeah. And I love that internal focus on, what do I want to sell? So I think this is where we're aligned. When I work with people on their personal brands and marketing and their media, it's not about what the market is telling you. It's not about what that external stuff is saying. It's who do you want to be and how do you want to show up in that space? So that was really when I moved from zero awareness into just being like, well, what actually am I doing? Like, how do I actually want to show up every day and build this beautiful business? I love that you nailed that, we get fixated on, well, here's the system. I have hired and worked with so many consultants who have, explained to me the sales funnel. They've explained to me email automations. They've explained to me all this stuff. And I walk away and I'm like, great, but what am I filling those spaces with? And as a creator, not knowing what story to tell in those spaces, I'm like, I got to figure out that stuff first.
Yeah.
So I think so if anyone watching is in this zero awareness phase, you just kind of locked into business and it's happening, what are some of the first steps people can take then to gain control and start seeing what they're actually selling?
Yeah. So I think that there is a focus on transformation. And this is particularly true for anyone that sells services. And that's sort of my area of expertise. And so I would say the steps that I would follow or the advice that I would give is define what sales means to you. What are you actually doing when you're selling? Get really clear on that transformation. And a couple of ways that I like to do that or think about it is positioning what you're selling, your offer or your service, in terms of a job description. So my clients hire me to do X, Y, and Z. That is really clear. That's what you're selling, right? Like you're not selling the offer, you are selling the outcome. That's what buyers are buying. They are buying the version of themselves after they go through your program or after they hire you. And so you can define it as a job description or even kind of communicating about it like a promise. What is the promise that you are delivering upon via your offer? I think that's really important. And then I think the other biggest gift that we can give ourselves when it comes to this low awareness stage is there's always this huge focus on closing and sales. And it's important, right? Like that's what we're here to do, close deals. But I actually think like always be curious over always be closing. To me, the point of sales is to get people to make a decision. It's not to get them to say yes. I don't want to force anyone to say yes. They don't end up being good clients, right? Like I've had so many, and when I first started out, I was under immense pressure to sell. And I would go for the close every single time. And I landed myself in some hot water with like unhappy clients. So always be curious over always be closing.
I keep looking down because anytime you talk, I'm like, I got to change that. There are a couple things. There are two things I want to follow up on though. I love that writing your offer as a job description, because especially as a service provider, I find it very vulnerable. Like I'm selling skills and knowledge that have been with me for my entire life. Like it's the longest, what I'm selling is what I have the longest relationship with. So I feel the need to protect it. I also feel like I sometimes overvalue or overpromise or overdeliver what this is. Bringing it down to the job description it just brings it down to, this is what you're hiring me for. And that's it. We get neutral with it. There's something about writing that out that just takes that brings it down to the space where it needs to be. It's not so much a transaction, it's a negotiation. This is what I am available for. Would it help you? Would it work for you?
Yeah, it's almost like having a boundary in your sales process, right? And like it can be a way to mitigate scope creep as well. Just being really clear about, this is the promise that I'm offering. This is the transformation you can expect. This is what you're getting.
Yeah. And I love to always be curious. Curiosity is so key, which I think will help curiosity, again, I wish I had you in my life 4 years ago. So once I moved from zero awareness into figuring out, okay, now I have something, there's this thing that I want to do, and now I'm being proactive in the sales. That was where the it came from, because I had
Mm,
a lot of judgments around selling. I
yeah.
am a frugal person. I do not shop a lot. So
Mhm.
actually, one of the great pieces of advice that I got at this phase of figuring out the sales journey was to just get really clear about how I make decisions, because
Mm,
I wanted to really bring to the surface the judgments and beliefs that I have around selling.
yeah.
So in this time, I bought a car. I paid for coaching lessons and just really paid attention to what was in my mind when I said yes to this stuff. Like, what information was I taking in? And I continue with that curious exploration of where am I feeling resistance and where am I feeling the ick?
Mhm.
And then creating my sales approach. So I'm selling in a way that I like to be sold to.
Yeah.
And I know that if I'm, welcoming the sales pitch, I'm reaching the hardest person to sell to. So
Yeah.
what are some other like judgments or workarounds that people have when they're dealing with that icky, I don't want to ask for the sale because I don't want to bother people. I don't want to irritate them. How can people get over that space?
Yeah. So if we think about the first phase as like kind of the mindset piece, because sales is such a head game, so the first phase is really kind of getting clear about what we're doing when we're selling, defining it, picking something that feels good to you. To me, that's the second phase. This is where process becomes really important. So I think that sales it's less of a personality and far more of a process.
Mhm.
So getting really clear about how do I want people to feel when I'm selling to them.
Mm.
And I love that you kind of went through your own buyer's journey in your head and were like, what questions am I asking myself? What hesitations do I have? What concerns or fears? What steps am I taking? This is where in this second phase it can be so valuable to kind of map out, all right, well, what is that process, that decision making process that my buyers are going through? What questions are they asking themselves? What hangups do they have? What information do they need to move forward? I think that's really critical to kind of put a lot of deep thought into. I would spend my time here versus investing in sales tech at
Mm.
this stage, right? Like it's so important. um because I often find that at this stage, there can be a little bit of a misalignment in terms of what we say we want and
Mm.
what we do. And so there's like insidious ways we kind of sabotage ourselves. So
Oh,
we rush through the offer, or we have a discovery call, a sales call, and we spend 50 minutes not talking about anything, right? Like not asking the right questions. So I think this is why process is so important.
yeah.
Really getting clear on what their decision making journey looks like, but also what our process is. Okay, so before, what kinds of questions am I going to ask them on my intake form?
Mhm.
What type of information will I include on my email reminder before we get on a call? When I
Mhm.
do have a call, do I have a flow for the conversation? Am I clear about what kinds of questions I want to ask or what information I need to gather to be able to properly position an offer?
Yeah.
So I think in the second stage, process is really important to kind of start to map it out and play around with it and see what works.
Yeah.
Yeah, and what feels good.
Yeah. And I think too, you nailed it so clearly. You need to be in this process.
Mhm.
You need to be taking in that data. You need to be paying attention to when people turn you down and when people say yes.
Yeah.
And like what contributed to those two decisions, because that's going to inform your client journey. Every business has its own client journey, and every client has their own individual journey. So giving them that space, I know that working with me is an investment of time, money, and self-image. And
Mm.
actually, it's that third piece that is the biggest sticking point for people. They'll
Yeah.
find the time, they'll find the money. And I have like high-end offers, and I also had entry-level offers. Like I'm flexible that way, but
Mhm.
it is the self-image piece. They need to feel worthy. So
Yeah.
that's actually where my marketing comes in. I put a lot of inspirational messages, helping people understand creativity, understand storytelling, and build the belief that they are capable of doing this.
Mm.
That knowing that they just need space to feel comfortable with that decision and buy in on themselves, I've worked that into the process.
Beautiful. Yeah. I love that. It takes the pressure off because it's a reframe, right? It's not like, okay, I need to convince, because we can't convince someone else of their own self-worth or like making an investment of themselves, but we can show them, right? Like you can show them the transformation. And yeah, I think that's really beautiful.
And I don't want to bypass how long it took me to learn this because when I started selling, I think, and I apologies to anyone who tried to have a conversation with me like years ago, every conversation was a closing conversation. No matter who they were, what they were into. Like I even had people saying, like, no, I just like, where did you go to school? That's where we're at right now. So I actually needed to kind of maybe I needed to just get over the hump, feel what it felt like to sell in a sleazy way and have that backfire. Sometimes you need to mess up a little bit, push yourself over, because the other extreme was I wasn't asking for the sale. And I think both of those extremes are not good. It's about, I had to get to a point where I am now, where it's like, it's just a conversation. You're figuring out who I am. I'm figuring out where you are, and where is the best place for us in the middle.
Yeah.
A lot of people, they might take 6 months. Some people buy in the room, but some people take 6 months to a year. And if all I need to do is give you that time before you say yes, happy to do that. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think this is again why getting really clear on what that process is important, because I think it is, and I've done the same thing. Like I remember when I first started selling, I would either not ask for the sale or rush to the close. And it was just, and I kind of feel like that's a rite of passage. Yeah. I'm not sure there is a fun way to bypass that. Sales is one of those things where we just have to practice in order to get better at it. And we can practice in like mock environments, but there's no substitution for the real thing. But again, having that process, I think, is really important. So one of the things that I do with my clients is we have like a meeting prep document before any sales call they have. And so in that document, we're basically highlighting what information do we know about our buyer, basically from their intake form or from the email that they shared. Then we kind of map out, well, on a really simplified buyer's journey, awareness, consideration, decision, where are they? If they're in awareness, there's no way in hell, pardon my language, we're going to rush to a decision. That's not the job. Our goal is to get them from awareness to consideration. And it's just kind of like slowing things down, getting really clear on where they are and what stage we need to get them to next, right? Like we don't always have to get them to make a decision. We just need to illuminate that next phase in their buyer's journey.
Yeah. I mean, I know from my experience, both not asking for the sale and rushing the close were both signs that I didn't have confidence in what I was selling and what I was offering. There's also a little bit of the scarcity mindset too, which I imagine a lot of businesses and salespeople are in that right now. Money is moving a little bit slower than it used to. And so how can people then deal when you're in this scarcity mindset where it's like, oh my God, I really need to, I need to make it. Bad things happen when you sell from scarcity. So what advice would you give people who are feeling that regardless of what stage you're at in the business?
Yeah. Well, I think the antidote to scarcity and desperation creeping into the sales process is always going to be your activities. And so I can remember when COVID hit, at the time I was working for a media company that sold high ticket coaching, and everything just kind of stalled. And we were like, oh my goodness, like what now? And so I doubled down on all of my activities, my sales activities. And so I was trying to get on the phone with people, not to sell to them, just to touch base, just to be like, how is it going? Like, this is a really wild time. I would double down on the types of, all the forms of outreach. So my DMs, my emails. So I think that is always a good antidote to desperation. If you have a ton of irons in the fire, you're not depending on a single iron. You're not, banking on that, putting all your eggs in one basket. So I think that's really important. And then just compassion, which is really difficult to offer ourselves and our buyers in these times, but it's so critical. Compassion with your buyers for the fact that they are a little more concerned and discerning with their purse strings, and compassion for yourself. It's okay to, acknowledge when desperation might be creeping in, just kind of acknowledge it and deal with it that way. But I think doubling down on outputs is
Yes.
important. And then I also think, you know, I will often re-examine my offers. And I don't say this because I think people should constantly iterate on what they're selling, but I do think that we are experiencing a shift in buying behavior right now.
Yeah.
And we can't necessarily meet that with our approach to sales. So one of the things that I think is important is to be able to meet our buyers where they are. If you have that ability to be flexible, to meet your buyers where they are, I think that's important. So some things that I'm noticing, I've noticed brands that have always kind of positioned themselves with premium offers are having smaller offers, entry-level offers to meet their buyers where they are. They haven't gotten rid of their premium offers, but they've just added something else, which I think is important. They're trying to meet this shift in buying behavior. I have seen people introduce flexible payment plans they're not discounting, but they are, again, just trying to meet their buyers where they are. So I think there's a few tools that we can leverage when things are slowing down and when desperation could creep in as an antidote.
That is, I mean, you basically just set me up to describe where I'm at today. And it actually, where I'm at today did actually come from this period of scarcity, right? Just acting out of fear, you know, and making all the mistakes too, right? Agreeing to work with people who weren't the right fit, but they were willing to pay the right dollar amount. The beautiful thing about where the phase I'm in right now is I was able to go back to just previous things that I had learned, the checking in, who am I? How do I want to show up in this space? And what feels right to me right now? And all the stuff that I've made since, I would say, since the fall, you know, I've introduced, and I'm about to do a more intentional promotion of, I've introduced a membership, right? So, like, thousands of dollars, a 12-week media training program might be out of reach, but a couple $100 a month for extra support, and even leaning into like getting on TV is a dream for many people. Their immediate needs are sales and marketing. So then really exploring, well, how can I then offer support and fill in that space? I want to talk more about your approach when things get tight and you need to fight your own fear. Daily habits. You are absolutely right. Just building every day, doing something towards the sales funnel has really helped keep me centered. So about a year ago, like, I was, you know, waking up in the middle of the night, panicked. Where is the next paycheck going to come from? Where am I going to get the next client? Now, you know, if that moment does come up, I just look at my next day schedule and I'm like, okay, no, there's that sales opportunity, and that's already in the gate. And that comes from just daily habits. So let's write a little love letter to daily habits, because it really is just bite-sizing it down into the things that you do every day. So what is for people who are looking to more streamline and create a process, where is a good place for them to start?
Okay. So I love this for so many reasons, because when I think about sales, a lot of it is momentum, and that momentum, sales is the lag measure. Sales is what we get after we have done all of this other work. And so, and it's also, it's relationship based. Like, that's what people are buying. And so I think that if the first phase was definition, the second was process, the third is consistency. And so I think that identifying a few key actions that put you in front of people. So for a lot of us, conversations create and conversations close. We need to be speaking with people in order to be in a position where we can extend offers, where they can ask us about our work. And so a few of the things, like a process that I developed a long time ago was I would take a look, like, what are you doing in your business and how can we leverage that from a sales perspective? So, for example, if you are consistent with content, I will always go and take a look at, well, who's viewing my profile? Who is interacting with my content? And then I go and I repay the favor. I go and look at their profile. I go and interact with their content, and I develop a relationship. That is sort of what social selling is, right? Like, it has nothing to do with selling and everything to do with creating these relationships.
Yes.
I do that every day. I like to dedicate at least 30 minutes a day where I have a list of people that I'm like, okay, they've been, checking me out. They're curious. There's a lot of implicit buying signals that are happening. Maybe they've downloaded a resource that on my email or from my website. And I will go and I will interact with them. So I would say 30 minutes a day goes a long way. I also find that doing little things like introducing people. So I had two people that were commenting on a LinkedIn post. They were both brand consultants. I'm like, do you guys know each other? You should know each other. And I've introduced them. I don't know when a sale will come from that introduction, but I'm sure one will down the road, right? Like, they're like, oh yeah, Talitha's awesome. She introduced us.
Yeah.
Things like that. Like, it doesn't have to be, we're not pitch slapping. It's not necessarily inviting people to our next upcoming webinar.
Yep.
Just doing little things to touch base and to create connection.
Yes.
And I find this is the part that most people get hung up on.
Yeah.
And I do think it's important to kind of reframe what we revisit our definition and reframe what we're actually doing here. We're just trying to build relationships because it's relationship-based selling. So I would say that is probably the most important, low-hanging fruit that people aren't doing that you could implement immediately and you'll see that momentum.
Yeah. Yeah. Again, it's like you're in my head. I did this yesterday or last week. I had just like a wide open day and I went through just the recent followers on my Instagram just to check in. And they were all people who had watched me do a workshop. And that's why they're now following me. So I even, with my marketing. So to me, there's no distinction between me in real life and me on social media. If you encounter me in real life, it's the same person you're talking to on social. So there are many things that I'm willing to offload to someone or automate. The relationship building, I insist on still being present in that because I think, especially for me and the stage of the business that I'm at, I'm getting so much learning about, how my brand is resonating with people and how I can serve in these other ways, which I think helps the business be more flexible. Because I think too, you keep talking about these are the actions that you're doing on a regular basis. I feel like a lot of businesses, they're drawn to automating too many things too quickly. And being too hands off too quickly. That works for Kim Kardashian because she's famous and you can't expect her to connect with her millions of followers. This is where slow growth. So you have a couple hundred followers on Instagram, you can maintain and curate and develop relationships out of those couple hundred followers. You're going to get more quality traction and more learning from being present in your business and building these relationships. I feel like, automating too soon, don't judge yourself. If you're not resourced and if you're not able to automate, that'll happen later on. Use this time to learn what you're actually selling and offering people.
Yeah, I think it's brilliant you mentioned that because I've worked with a lot of 7-figure business owners that still haven't automated that still haven't, they still are involved in sales. They'll do all of the sales calls. Because it's a very important engine inside of the business. We seem to be in a rush to want to outsource and automate. But again, back to this shift in buying behavior, buyers don't want that. They can tell when they're going through an automated Instagram funnel. They can tell when you have reached out to them with an automated AI generated message. It doesn't feel good. People are craving connection.
Yes.
And you can't fake that.
No, you can't.
You cannot fake that. It's just one of those things that you have to invest in.
Yeah. And I think especially when you're a service provider, because ultimately how you're selling is planting the seeds for the relationship you're ultimately going to have.
Absolutely.
So that's where I'm and the work that I do is very collaborative. I need willing participants and, bringing to me is something that I can actually work with. If I use the sales journey, however long it is, to explore that, then
Mm.
it's mutually beneficial. Yeah, but yeah, it's I love that. Always be curious, always be
Mhm.
communicating. It leads to closing. Just know that it does. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Amazing. So, and I think too, one thing that changed the needle for me was being very intentional with the sales funnel itself. So I've
Mhm.
identified I've got like 5 key pieces. So when I do my daily to-do list,
Yeah,
I write out again, these are the 5 key pieces. And as long as I'm doing something that speaks to 3 of those things, and it is because I used to, especially in the very beginning when I was just gearing myself up to start selling,
yeah,
it would be this huge event. I would have to like rally the troops and just really dig deep just to be in that space,
yeah.
breaking it down to, but I think it's part of the journey too, right? You need to go through those 3 phases in
Mm,
order to get to the space where it's like, now I know what I'm doing. And
yeah,
it's the way that I want to do this and conducting business my own way.
yeah. Beautiful. It's a
Fantastic.
process and a practice.
Exactly. Oh my God. Okay. I feel like I want to talk to you about qualifying, but I think that's a whole other conversation to have with people. So I hope
Yeah.
people got, I always end up taking notes and new ideas whenever I talk to you. So where can people learn more about working with you?
Yeah, so the best place is LinkedIn. Talitha Davis on LinkedIn. I'm there almost every day. And that's the best place to learn about my work and also just to get more information about how to sell with more ease and more comfort.
Oh yeah. Well, yeah. We all need that right now. Well, thank you so much for this conversation. I learned a lot as I always do.
Thank you for having me, Tara. It was great.
Yeah. Fantastic. Bye-bye.
Bye.